Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. I'm James McGowan. Don't laugh.
Oh, we're going back to the old intro.
Huh? Oh, right.
Anyway, so we were talking.
Wait. Welcome
No.
back to the BookEnds YouTube channel.
We're just going.
Yeah. Today's
Yeah.
about us. Just no. There's no other way I'd rather have
Actually
it.
is why the messy start just makes sense.
Yeah, there's no other way I'd rather have it. Let's talk about us.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. So what we were talking about recently was the evolution of an agent's list, or how an agent decides what they're going to represent, but also how that changes over time.
One of the cool things about BookEnds is that we have folks who are at every level of stage building, right? Like we have people who are still taking on their first few clients, people who are still making their first few sales, but we have people who have been here for 20 years who have extensive client lists that are New York Times bestseller. So it's really cool that we have somebody almost in like every stage of the process, but we also get to share that with each other and share those experiences. And so basically what I'm saying is we're kind of always talking about this in some way or another.
Yeah, because there's always
or
conversations of how a lot of people are readjusting their lists. Like I'm going to start trying this, or I'm not going to open to this anymore, or constant conversations, really.
Yeah. So first, for clarity, when we're talking about our list, we're talking about our clients, the type of books that we represent, the books that we are publishing. And that those are, for every agent, it's going to look different, but also it's going to be a different size. Some agents might like a smaller roster of clients. Some agents have, in the area of 40 to 50. Some agents who have been around for a really long time have an extensive backlist of clients, but a certain number of active, like front list clients. So it does look different for everybody. But what we're talking about in general is the clients that we have, the types of books that we're working on at present.
Yeah, and also the types of books we're open to taking on, because sometimes those can be two different things.
Yeah.
Sometimes our list might be largely backlist, let's say, which are books that we've sold a while ago, but might be in a different genre than what we are currently looking for.
Yeah, exactly. So there are a few different ways that we look to, like, how we make that up, right? Like there's a few different things that go into it.
Yeah.
I think the most obvious ones are our preferences, the kinds of things we like,
Mm-hmm.
or the kinds of things we have a skill set in, right? Like they're not always the same.
Right.
Which I think a lot of people forget.
And when an agent first starts, and you can speak to this because you first started more recently than I first started, usually you come in with an idea of what your vision for that list is, what you want it to look like, and the kind of books you think you're going to represent.
Mine was so wrong. Mine was so wrong. When I first started, I was reading a ton of, you might remember, I was reading a ton of like YA fantasy, and adult thriller, suspense. That's what I read a lot of still. But I thought that my list was going to be like 50-50 YA adult. And it's so the opposite. It's YA is not present on my list, and it's like 75-25 picture books adult. So it's really interesting how it shakes out. But I guess that's what we're supposed to be talking about. Because it's not just our preferences that go into it. It's also, like things kind of take on a life of their own a little bit. We start working on one thing and soon that leads to 3 more, and you realize you're good at selling a certain thing, or the market is looking for a certain thing. So that all does play into your list, your makeup of your list.
Yeah, and you're not the only person that's happened to.
No.
Without naming names or throwing people under the bus, there are a number of people at BookEnds who, when hired, gave me a very specific idea of what they were going to represent, the authors they were going to look for, and in some cases never took on one client in that genre, and instead just sort of fell into, and I'm going to honestly say fell into, because I think there are a lot of agents with experience of falling into something, and that's how they discovered their list.
Yeah, and I think with our job in particular, it's really important to be open. I mean, in all of publishing, it's important to be open, but for an agent, you just never know what's going to click for you. I did not expect picture books, not even a little bit. I did not expect illustrated. That's not where I would have ever marked myself.
Right.
But I ended up working with Tracy on one, and it just all fell into place. And then before I knew it, I had a client list of like 30 picture book authors and illustrators. So you can't, like, I think when the agents that are very closed-minded and keep their eyes focused on one thing probably find that it's harder. I think it's a harder job to do when you are like blinders on, we're going for that.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I think the most exciting, most successful parts of our job come in the things that we're not expecting, really.
Yeah, when I got my first job in publishing as an editorial assistant at Berkeley, I was hired by 2 editors whose lists were predominantly mystery and romance. And I remember through that hiring stage, the first romance I ever read was for the job interview. I had never read a romance novel before that. I'd read a ton of mysteries, probably a ton of like paperbacks that I picked up at the grocery store back in the day. So bestsellers, that kind of thing. But I'd never read a romance novel. So when I opened BookEnds and became an agent, because those were the kinds of books I was working on as an editor, it was a natural transition to continue to do those types of mysteries and the romances, because not only did I know it from the editorial perspective, I knew what publishers were buying, but I also had a network in those areas. Those were the editors I knew, those were the authors I knew. When I am spreading the word that I've opened my doors as an agent, those were the groups that knew me and that I went out to. So that was my initial list. That, and because I had been working on the Complete Idiot's Guide and Dummies Guide series, again, BookEnds did a ton of those books when we first opened our doors, because those were the books that were easy for us to do, where we had the connections, where we had the network, where we could sell them. So when we opened our doors, those were the lists we've done. I have very few romance authors anymore. I have a couple still on my list, but it's not an area where I am actively in. I did very well in it, but I think there are people at BookEnds who do it better and do it differently and still read the genre on a regular basis, which I don't. So my list transitioned for a number of reasons, but I think one of them was also that my reading preferences as a reader and a person, my reading started to change. And as that changed, so did my list to correspond with those books I was currently reading.
It's funny, like all of the agents that I've talked to too, there seems to be 2 different types of agents, right? The kind of agent that reps what they read and the kind of agent that does not read what they rep, right? Like
Right.
the agents who love mysteries only rep mysteries or rep majority mysteries. The agents who love mysteries but rep romance and everything else for that refresher or that break. So everybody's brain does work differently too. And we all approach this list with like, where can I put my energy and know that it's going to be effective? And I think the thing to remember is that agents, as we love what we do, we love the books, we love the clients, but we are still a business, right? Like we're all running a business. So it's important that we're looking at what can I apply my set of skills to that's going to result in book sales and ultimately result in a salary.
Yeah, and to your point about the represent what you read or what or not, is that I have shelves of cookbooks in my house. I love cooking. I love cookbooks.
It's a beautiful shelf of cookbooks, though. Like the magnificent shelf of cookbooks. It's not just like a hobbyist shelf of cookbooks.
It's a lot of cookbooks.
It's
a lot
amazing.
of cookbooks. I have never represented, nor will I, a cookbook as much as I love them. I mean, I just love looking through them and the pictures. And, I have cookbooks that I will never get rid of, even though I've only cooked 2 recipes out of them. And
it's funny because I love cookbooks and I tried it. And then I was like, okay, this was a lot of fun. I don't think I want a list of cookbooks.
Right.
So like it is about just experimenting at some point too.
Yeah. And knowing what you want to work on versus what really is sort of the hobby side of you, I think sometimes versus the reading. I don't know what else I was going to say about that. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Another example of my evolving list also sort of came for me with life experience and where I was in life. So when I was in editorial and I was young and I was in my 20s, I was doing wedding books. It was that time of life. A lot of people I knew were getting married, that kind of thing. You would not catch me with a wedding book today. It's just, I don't even know if they really sell. Do people still buy wedding books? Like, it's just, I have so moved out of that area that it's not something I would do. And I think that's very common in nonfiction too, where the books that you're reading are what that's the market, but then again, there are people who are fully committed in the nonfiction section to, let's say, business books or health books, and that's all they do, and they've been doing that for years and
Right.
years and years, and that's their expertise because they know those areas. How much they use the books outside of representing them, I can't say, but for me, that evolution happened too, based on where I was in my life and what my focuses and my peers' focuses were at that time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think so. The one of the clarifications that I wanted to make, and I think this is easily kind of lost, especially when we talk about MSWL, because folks are like, well, this was on your MSWL a year ago. And I want to talk about how our lists are always changing. They're a living thing in a way. They're very fluid. So for me, I have a very extensive picture book list, and I just keep bringing it back to my list because it's easier to use that example. But I have a very extensive picture book list. But going forward, I'm not as keen to keep building that part of my list, right? Like it's a solid thing, it's surviving, it's doing great things, but I really want to build another part of my list. So I think the things that agents are always considering are, what is the capacity of my list? What is the market doing? How can my list fit into the market? And do I want to do something else? So I feel like if that's always kind of happening, and we've seen it at BookEnds so many times. We've seen, a romance agent start doing nonfiction and start doing nonfiction really well. And then, we've seen sci-fi agents take on picture books. Like it's just always, there's always bits that are expanding and changing and evolving. But that does not mean that the clients that we have are all going away. That doesn't mean that if I want to sign some more mystery that I'm getting rid of all of my picture books. It's not that like black and white. It's a little more fluid.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I try to encourage here at BookEnds, and I can't speak that all agents, is I think diversification is important. Markets in everything, including publishing, fluctuate. So if an agent puts all of their eggs in one genre, and I'm not necessarily saying romance is a big genre. You could be doing paranormal romance, rom-coms, historic romance. The market in romance tends to fluctuate between the subgenres, not so much the market. But if you've committed your entire romance list to only historicals, and that side of the market starts to struggle, your entire list is struggling. So that's why I feel that diversification is important for agents. That's like what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Having an entire picture book list could be tough. So diversifying, and for you, that looks like entering into the adult market. For another agent, that might look like middle grade or YA or chapter books. So it looks different for every agent, but I think it's important to do that. And also to your point about your clients and things like that, never assume as a client that looking at what an agent is seeking in submissions identifies what they do and don't do. Because what I do for my clients is not necessarily representative of what my MSWL list looks like or what I'm open to in queries. I've had clients come to me before saying, I've written a romance, but I saw on your list that you're not looking for romance. So should I go find another agent? I'm like, no, it's something I can do. I'm very capable of doing. I really like doing, but for you, I will do it. You're my client, but it doesn't mean that I'm looking to build a list in that area, which is why I'm not open to it.
Yeah, I have to tell people that in offer calls, especially I think at BookEnds, right? Like, I think people see the picture books and like, oh, well, you don't touch novels, right? But I'm like, well, hang on. Also, not only, do I have like what I feel is a specialty in novels, but like I was raised on a steady diet of romance at BookEnds, right? Like I have read so many, I've written reader reports, I know the market, I see what my colleagues are selling. I could handle myself in romance if I really had to. I just don't want to. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't do it for a client. If a client was like, no, this is the book of my career, I want to write this thing. Doesn't mean I couldn't handle it. Or it doesn't mean I couldn't
want to. You might want to because you love that client's voice in their writing. And no matter what they're doing, you love reading that work. And that's
or I can phone a friend, right? I could be like, Kim, please help me if I had to. And then we do that at BookEnds too. Like we've had clients, represented by 2 agents, or an agent really assist and consult on what we might do with a particular client's project outside of our wheelhouse or whatever. So I think it's really important that you're always having that conversation with your agent, and to remember that MSWL does not equal skills. It just equals more like goals, I would say.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's fun too, you know, like everybody's different. I like trying new things. So for me, sometimes opening my list or my query inbox to something new allows me an opportunity to try new things and add variety to what I do on a daily basis and have experiences with different authors and different genres and different editors. And I enjoy that aspect.
It keeps it exciting. I also really love the challenge of making a sub list. So, I mean, for the past few years, I've tried a lot of different things in adult. Like I've done a sci-fi, nonfiction. I like the challenge of like, okay, who can I submit to? Can I meet this editor? That's really fun to me. So I feel the same way about the challenges, but a lot of agents don't. A lot of agents might like that predictability of I'm going to X at Z and I'm going to go to A at B and this is who I'm going to.
Right. I know exactly what I'm doing. I don't want to shift. But neither one is wrong either.
No.
You know, some agents just really find their comfort space, not just their safe space, but the space where they really have an expertise and they don't want to veer off that too much.
Yeah. And I think the thing to remember, and probably like the point we can probably end on, is that an agent's list is always built on strategy and business. Like we're looking for what we can do to build a career, to build a backlist that can sustain us in royalties, that will continue to be on shelves and reaching readers, because that's what's going to make us money, really. So, yeah. Okay. Well, I hope that was a fun look at how at least we approach our list, but I think a lot of agents are probably similar in some way, shape, or form. But I hope it was helpful, especially as you're approaching MSWL or, looking at who an agent represents and why. But if you have questions, leave them in the comments below. If not, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you back here next week.
Bye.